Army does not belong to any president. It is the army of the people for the people. It does not exist to protect power, and it must never, ever be used to intimidate or silence the very people it was created to defend.
As Donald Trump sat down to watch the military parade on Sunday, more than 1 million people in cities across the country showed up to march against both the parade and Donald Trump himself, including in Alexandria, Virginia, where the former acting vice chief of the National Guard denounced the president's use of the National Guard to help carry out his deportation policies. Joining us now, retired Major General of the U.S. National Guard. You just heard him there, Randy Manner, Doug Brinkley, Cornell Belcher, and David Drucker are still with us as well. All right, Major, I do want to get to you first. Talk to me about, General, talk to me about what you were trying to convey there at that speech when you were talking about what you're seeing on the streets in this country with the National Guard.
So I think it's very important to say that we were celebrating the Army's birthday, and it was also outstanding what those young soldiers did in that parade and all the civilians and contractors that did to make it a very successful and safe parade. So that's the first thing. At the same time, it's not something about how we celebrate a birthday in the Army. We usually have some cake. We recognize the eldest Army person, the youngest. We say a few speeches, and we tell some stories. And so it's one of those things where it's an overblown use of a demonstration of power that's not in keeping with the ethics of the United States Army. We are quiet professionals. Why I was compelled to speak out on that No King's Day Army birthday speech was to basically remind everybody that the Army is here as an extension of the American people, and it is not ever to be used against the American people. And all those young National Guardsmen and those young Marines that are in there that were not asked for by the mayor or by the governor, they're doing the best they can to stay busy and keep their mind in the game, while, of course, the Los Angeles police, which have been doing a wonderful job, continue to maintain order in that city.
Cornell, I asked this of Jacob last hour. I want to ask you as well. Why was this the tipping point to see more than 1 million Americans take to the streets?
Look, I think this is not disconnected from the conversation we were just having about division in America. And look, I do focus groups all the time, and Americans talk about sort of how divided we are, and especially women in these focus groups talk about how they fear for the future of the children if America keeps on this divisive pathway, and we keep growing more and more divided. They worry about the kind of future that their children will have. But also, Katie, I gotta say that last thing that we just did there, it struck me in a profound way, because I just remember back, and I'm a little older, but I remember when Reagan brought us all together after the Challenger disaster, right? And I remember how Bill Clinton brought us all together after the Oklahoma City bombing. I remember, Obama not so long ago, singing Amazing Grace after the shooting in South Carolina. Job of the president, number one job of the president is the safety of American people. And part of that is being, healer in chief, not just commander in chief. And we do need leadership at the very top that works hard at keeping all of this together, right? All of this union, which we know historically has been very hard to sort of keep together. It is always trying to come apart. And we need someone at the very top who, and historically, whether it be Republican or Democrat, we've seen in the presidency, Republicans and Democrats work hard at trying to hold this together. But as the general just talked about, sort of the ethics, this is different. We have someone at the top right now who I would argue is working harder and sees more political advantage in dividing Americans than bringing Americans together. And I think this is a reaction across the country with Americans who don't want to be divided, who don't
defend Israel from drone and missile strikes launched by Iran. The two sides trading more attacks overnight as that conflict continues to escalate. Jennifer Griffin, live from the Pentagon, brings us up to speed from her post now. And Jennifer, hello.
Hi, Bill. The Israelis, using American-made F-35 stealth fighter jets, did in less than 4 days something that the Russian Air Force has been incapable of doing in Ukraine for 3.5 years. It established air superiority. That means Israeli non-stealth F-15 and F-16 fighter jets can now carry out airstrikes and hunt down the mobile ballistic missile launchers that are terrorizing Israeli cities. 2 U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyers, the USS Sullivans and USS Arleigh Burke in the eastern Mediterranean, have been shooting down Iranian missiles aimed at Israel. The Navy has ordered the USS Thomas Hudner for backup, along with a 4th Navy destroyer. And we have now learned the aircraft carrier strike group, the USS Nimitz, on its final sea voyage will deploy from the Pacific. Deeply symbolic, since it was the Nimitz deployed in 1980 and its helicopters that were part of the failed U.S. effort to rescue the American hostages held at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The U.S. has been in a shadow war against Iran ever since. Israel may not be able to reach the parts of Iran's nuclear program that are buried inside mountains and underground without U.S. help. U.S. B-2 bombers are the only air asset that can drop the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs known as the Massive Ordnance Penetrator. Only the U.S. has them. When pressed on whether Trump had denied any military requests like the 30,000-pound bunker buster bombs delivered by those B-2 bombers needed to hit Iran's deeply buried nuclear sites, Netanyahu deflected, saying it was President Trump's decision. Quote, "I trust his judgment completely." That from Brett Baer's exclusive interview with the Israeli Prime Minister yesterday. Bill?
Thank you, Jennifer. Jennifer Griffin, the Pentagon, thank you. Dana?
And for more on all of this, we do have that special report anchor, Brett Baer, with us. And Brett, just as we were talking in the last few minutes, there is a new exclusive report from the Wall Street Journal that says this: a battered Iran signals it wants to de-escalate hostilities with Israel and negotiate as long as the United States stays out of the fight. This is just developing now. Let's get your take on it, since you are quite up to speed.
Yeah, good morning, Bill and Dana. I asked Prime Minister Netanyahu yesterday about the Iran foreign minister talking to reporters, saying if Israel stops attacking, we will stop counterattacking and get to the table, suggesting that they were coming to the table. This is what the Iran foreign minister said, with a deal that possibly America would see as acceptable. The Prime Minister said that is essentially BS. He said that's just not true. It's a bunch of hogwash, in his words, that when they were coming to the table, he cited the Supreme Leader saying death to America, death to Israel, as that was happening. So I think there's a lot of skepticism about this outreach. That said, President Trump has said he does want to get back to the table if they're serious about agreeing to dismantlement.
Yeah, a couple of things here. It struck me what General Keane was arguing a moment ago when I asked specifically about that. The president of Israel, Herzog, was with Dana and me about half an hour ago. Fordow is apparently the most fortified nuclear site in the entire country of Iran. So far as we can tell, it's hard to reach. Half a mile buried beneath rock inside of a mountain. Here is President Herzog on the question of going nuclear in real time. Watch. Can they fuel a bomb amidst this war on day 4 already?
As far as I know, I don't think it's feasible. I think that would be a very dangerous development. We are trying with all our might and capabilities and our heroic fighters and pilots to make sure that they don't get there, but rather that we delay, postpone, undermine their capability of getting to the bomb.
I don't want to get too far ahead of this, but Keene's argument is the United States has to use bunker buster bombs now to take out this facility. Otherwise, the Arab region looks at you and says, what was this war all about? In a year or two, you get to fortify that center yet again. Did Netanyahu go there with you?
I went many times to try to get that answer. I have heard privately that the ask has happened, but not the response. I don't know what the response is. Prime Minister Netanyahu wouldn't get that specific. It is true that the B-2 bomber is the only thing that can carry the 30,000-pound MOP, the massive ordnance penetrator, the bunker buster that can get into the half-mile deep mountain lair, if you will, of Fordow. And then Isfahan is another facility that's buried deeply and where enriched uranium is stored. So the Iranians have a couple of facilities that only U.S. technology could get to, and the real question is whether President Trump will decide that that's worth it now, and that's where this hinges.
You know, Russia apparently, according to the wires, wants to be seen as a peacemaker in this situation, saying that it could help communicate between Israel and Iran, and yet it doesn't seem to want to be a peacemaker in its own region. You have President Trump in Canada today with the G7. They're likely to talk about Israel, and Zelensky is going to be in Canada as well. And I wonder how Russia fits into all of this.
Yeah, that's a great question, Dan. I mean, the fact that President Trump had this call with President Putin and Putin volunteering to get in the middle of Israel and Iran as this peacekeeping role, and yet won't sit at the table with Zelensky to bring the end to the current war that they are fighting is pretty ironic. I think the G7 is going to be pretty loud and boisterous, and a lot of other leaders are going to make their feelings clear about both of these operations.
Yeah. Good to work with Netanyahu, and we'll see what we get today.